Welcome to Secrets of a Seven-Figure Coach, the podcast for coaches, consultants, and creative entrepreneurs who want to hit between $100K and $1 million in annual revenue. I'm Beck Keane, your host and business mentor. On this podcast, I'm sharing the mindset, strategy, and energetics required to create a multi-six-figure business and beyond. Before becoming a coach, I grew 3 successful businesses. I'm an award-winning business owner who built and exited $1 million consulting firm and an industry-leading app that won awards back in 2016. And that all happened before I started my own coaching business, which has since generated over $2 million in lifetime revenue in part-time hours. I'm taking you behind the scenes from my very first 10K month to my very first 100K month. I'll also bring in coaches and consultants who have scaled their own coaching businesses so you can learn real-world tools and strategies from others who have walked the path. If you are a coach, consultant, or creative entrepreneur looking to 2 to 4x your revenue while also having an incredibly rich personal life, this podcast is for you. Hello, and welcome to Secrets of a Seven-Figure Coach. I'm your host, Beck Keane. I'm a business mentor, master certified coach, award-winning entrepreneur, around the world sailor, which we're going to talk about today. And my mission is to help more coaches, consultants, and creative entrepreneurs make bank. In today's episode, we're talking about how to be in the energy of the what without needing to know the how. I have a really incredible story to share with you. And I revisit this story often in my own mind because I was 18 at the time of this story that I'm going to share with you in a hot second here. And I was so clear on the what. I was so clear on my vision that I wasn't willing for it not to work. It's like there was not a world where I was not going to be successful with this goal. And side note, a lot of people have goals, a lot of people have big goals, and they're afraid to go for them because they're afraid of what happens if they don't hit the goal. Now, that could be a whole nother episode on that, but like, think about that. Think about how you might not be going after a goal because you're holding yourself back from feeling some kind of way of what happens if you don't hit that goal. Like, I would much rather see you go for the goal and go for the thing and stretch yourself and see what happens along the way. Like, who do you become along the way? I mean, let's take revenue or making money as an example. Let's say you're at 20K months and you want to get to 50K months. I might challenge you to turn your 50K goal into a 100K a month goal. And if you come to me with the energy of like, well, Becky, what if I don't hit the 100K? Okay, well, what if you do? Like, good problem to have. But also, what if you hit 50K? What if in order to get from 20K to 50K, you have to go at it with the energy of the 100K to then hit 50K? Like, that's another good problem to have, that you hit 50K. And the point of this is that we need to be focused in on the what. We need to be connected to the what without forcing the how. So many people have these incredible ideas, these incredible visions, but they're trying to force the how. And when you do that, it sucks the energy out of the what, and it also prevents the how from coming in. I like to say when the what is clear, the how will appear. And oftentimes, the how is not up to you, but what it requires is deep self-trust, deep inner belief. And most people are really uncomfortable with that. Most people haven't developed that muscle and they want evidence before the evidence is there. And if they don't see the evidence, they don't go for the thing. So, like, super quick example, you might want to only be selling to high ticket clients, but because you don't see them in your world or in your orbit, you don't think you have them. And so you don't go for them. Versus believing that they are there, knowing how many high ticket clients are in this world, and then becoming the version of you that is an energetic match for calling those people in. Okay, let's get to my story. So rewind the clock. I'm 18 years old. I'm going to university in my hometown, Halifax, Nova Scotia. I am bored to tears. I'm enrolled in sciences. Both my parents were scientists. And so there was a part of me that thought I was also supposed to be a scientist. Not that they ever told me that, but it was like I inherited that belief that, okay, I need to be a scientist, like follow in my parents' footsteps. And I was probably very much thinking about my father in particular, who had passed away when I was 12. I was going to the same university that he had taught at. Many of his peers and friends were there, and for sure there was a part of me that thought, like, I'll make daddy proud if I go to this school and I follow in his footsteps. Well, meanwhile, I am walking the halls and seeing photos of my father in the hallways in the geology department and the marine geophysics department, and I'm not loving it. Like, it's the opposite of love. I don't want to be there. I want to be out in the world. I want to be exploring. I am such an adventurer. And so one day I come home from lunch and there was an article in the newspaper. It was sitting on the kitchen table, article in the newspaper about the Picton Castle, which was or is a ship, a sailing ship, three-masted sailing ship, and it was going for its first round the world voyage. I don't remember if it said it needed crew, but what I do remember is the energy in my body that was like, you need to get your ass on that ship. Now, it was such a clear, energetic knowing. I wasn't really thinking about how am I going to make that happen. It was more like, I'm getting on that ship. So what am I going to do about it? Well, coincidentally, my mother's boyfriend, who later became my stepfather, he knew some people in the town of Lunenburg where the ship was docked, and he was able to find the phone number of the captain for me while I was back at school for the afternoon. So when I came home, he had written the number for me on a sticky note next to the phone. And without really thinking, yes, I was scared. Yes, I was so scared. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to say or what's going to happen. But I picked up the phone and ended up talking to the captain. And in a very quick conversation, the captain said, well, when do you want to come see the ship? And I was like, I remember I covered the phone. This is like back in the day where there wasn't a mute button. I covered the phone and asked my mom in the background if I could borrow her car. She said yes. And I suggested that I would go meet with the captain the very next day. So the very next day, I find myself on board this ship. It's kind of in shambles. It needs a ton of work. But the captain talked about how he needed to get the ship painted for the summer. And I was like, well, look, like, let's make a deal here. We didn't really even talk about the round the world voyage at this point. It was more like, get myself on the ship for the summer and then I'll figure out the rest. It was like, step one, get yourself on the ship. So he offered me a job for $100 a week, and that included room and board. So I would live and stay on the ship with the other crew. I'd get paid $100 a week, and in exchange, I would paint the ship. I told him I was like an expert painter. I hadn't really painted anything in my life, but I learned really, really fast. Okay, so over the course of the summer, I'm on this ship, and I have also fallen in love with one of the other crew members. And what I've really fallen in love with, however, is the idea that not just the idea, but the reality that the ship is sailing around the world. So in November of 1997, the ship is leaving Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, and it's traveling all around the world, an 18-month voyage. So think about East Coast of Canada. That's where it's departing, going down through the eastern seaboard, Bermuda, Caribbean islands, through the Panama Canal, west to the Galapagos, and down to Pitcairn Island, which is where Mutiny on the Bounty took place, back like northwest direction across the Pacific through Marquesas, through Tahiti, Rarotonga, Bora Bora, Fiji, Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, like all those incredible Pacific islands before landing in Australia, going across the Indian Ocean, East Africa, South Africa, a tiny island off of West Coast Africa called St. Helena, before returning to the Caribbean and then back home. 18 entire months. I mean, this was like, I won't say that sailing around the world was my dream, travel was my dream. And I was thinking at the time, what better way to travel than to be on a ship? Some of the places we went, there wasn't even airplanes. There was no, like, as in there was no airstrips on these islands. And this is how many years ago, people? Like, I was 18 and I'm 46-ish right now. So do the math. Like, I can't do the math in my head, but this is some time ago. A lot of, I don't want to say undiscovered places, but like really remote and not touristy places. This was like such an incredible opportunity. So the way the ship was run is there was professional crew. So these were people that the captain was paying. They had years of experience. They had come up through the ranks. They had worked on other ships. They knew what they were doing. They had licenses. And this was the professional crew. Those people, by the time I showed up on the ship, they had already been selected. They already had jobs. And the way the ship was being funded was through paying crew. So people were paying, like regular average people were paying $32,500 US to come on board for this 18-month voyage. The paying crew were also going to work on the ship and they would learn traditional seamanship, but they would have this opportunity of a lifetime to be on this 18-month voyage. You could also purchase shorter stints and not necessarily come for the entire voyage. But by the time I got on board, professional crew were handled. And so if I wanted to go on the ship, if I wanted to be a crew member on this ship, and now I've been on board at this point for like, a few months. I'm in love with this guy, and or at least I think I'm in love with this guy. and and I just want to go. That's all I know is I cannot picture this ship leaving the dock without me. So I launched this campaign to make $32,500. The first thing I did was, because of my father's pension, which I was able to receive if I was enrolled in a accredited university, is I wrote a letter to the Canadian government and I asked them if I could have my pension while on this nautical studies program. And this was perhaps a slight bending of things, but much to my surprise, they agreed. So that totaled $7,500. So I had $7,500. The captain, he offered me a mini scholarship, which meant he would fund $5,000 of my trip if I was more on the professional crew side, as in I stood more watches. Basically, I had to work more than the paying people. My situation was really interesting because I did pay, but I was then delegated to the professional crew. And so I got treated more like a professional crew. By the end of the trip, those lines were quite blurry between everybody, but that's a whole nother story for another time. Okay, so I had $7,500 from the Canadian government. I had $5,000 from the captain. That left me with $20,000 US I still need to come up with. So my idea was to ask 20 people to fundraise to sponsor me for $1,000 a person. 20 times 1,000, $20,000. I thought this would be really easy. I made posters. I wrote letters. I wrote letters to all these companies in Nova Scotia. I talked about the opportunity. I got myself in newspapers. I got myself on radios. I talked about this trip and how we would be taking like educational supplies around the world and how I'll send back like reports and articles and you can follow my journey. Like I really thought people were going to be all over this and be throwing money at me. Well, 2 months into my campaign, which is now 4 months later, like the ship is leaving in a month, I had zero sponsors. And so if I had looked at the evidence would have told me that I wasn't going on this ship. I did not look at that as evidence. I looked at the evidence of what I had already created, of how far I had come, and I completely stayed connected to the what. And the what was I was going on this ship. The ship was not sailing without me. There was not a chance I wasn't going to be on board. So I held the faith, I held the belief, and I stayed completely connected to the vision. Fast forward a couple weeks, we had taken the ship for what we called a shakedown cruise, which is when you go to nearby ports, you sail around, like you're sort of testing systems, procedures, engines, sail handling, all the things like before you head off on this big long 18-month voyage where access to facilities and resources may be limited. Let's make sure like the ship actually works kind of vibe. That's what a shakedown cruise is. We were in Martha's Vineyard. And I remember the day it was like cold and windy, and I was standing on the dock. And in a lot of places that we went to, people would come see the ship and be like, oh my gosh, what's the story? And we had a poster, people could read about it, but they were always asking the crew, like they were always like, hey, where are you guys going? What's the scoop? And sometimes that's how people became crew, is they would see us in a port and then they would figure out how to join us in another port. Anyway, I'm standing on the dock and I'm looking at the ship and I'm just sort of in that like wistful energy, like the ship is leaving in several weeks time and I still don't have that 20K. Like, that sort of like that was kind of the energy that day. And this woman comes up to me and she's like, oh, are you crew? I'm like, yes. I tell her my story. We talk about the ship and I'm like, I really want to go. I'm trying to find these sponsors, but like so far, I still need to raise $20,000. And she was like, oh, well, I have some friends who might be interested in helping you. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, I have some friends who like you could pitch and I'd be happy to facilitate a dinner party between you and them. I mean, this is like so random, on a dock, Martha's Vineyard. At least that's where it was in my mind, somewhere in the States. I'm pretty sure it was Martha's Vineyard. And the only trick was she was heading back home to Philadelphia. Well, guess what, people? My boyfriend at the time, Jesse, he lived in Philadelphia, and we were going to visit his family before going on this round the world voyage. He was one of the paid crew members. He was going to be the ship's rigger. And so his spot on the ship was secure. Mine, not so much. So she's offered to host me a dinner party in Philadelphia, of all places, which turns out I'll be in Philly the following week. So I find myself at Jesse's house. I almost didn't call her because I felt so stupid. I was like, oh my God, like this is ridiculous. She was probably just being nice. I picked up the phone anyway. I called her up. She's like, yep, come over for dinner. I'll invite my friends over. You can talk about the ship, etc. So we went over to her house. Well, we are driving down this driveway and it's not a house. It's a mansion. Like now I could be getting some of the details wrong because it was a long time ago. But in my mind, it was a castle. It was this huge stone castle with like vineyards and tennis courts and swimming pools and horses. And I don't know if all that was there, but that's the vibe. Like girl next door driving down a road into like princess land. That's the kind of property that we approached. And Jesse, the boyfriend, he was like, wait, who are her friends? And I was like, I have no idea. So we have dinner. The people introduce themselves. I talk about the ship. I had a Bristol board poster. Like I had a Bristol board poster of what I was promising, which was like to write letters, to send articles, like to keep you updated on my travels. And all I was asking was $1,000 from 20 people. So I'm like crossing my fingers here that a couple of the people at this table are going to give me each $1,000. So to be clear, I said to them at dinner, I said, I'm looking for 20 people to sponsor me for $1,000 each. And they said, how many people do you have so far? And I was like, well, none. I told them about the government money. I told them about the captain's 5K so that I still needed the 20K. And they were like, and the ship's leaving in 2 weeks. And I was like, yes. But like little me, like so optimistic, like so like back is straight, like, yeah, no problem. There's no problems here. We're going. And they're like, okay. And they're like, we'd really like to help you and support your trip. And I was like, oh my God, like, okay, yay, this is really happening. Like doors are going to open up. More people are going to give me money. And I'm thinking they're going to hand me like $1,000 or whatever, pledge $1,000, maybe $500 each. And they said, as they handed over an envelope, they each handed me an envelope with my name on it. And they said, there are two conditions to you accepting this money. And they said, one, you cannot tell anyone who gave you this money. And as in, I cannot reveal their names. And two, you don't need to send us anything. We just want you to go and have like a life-changing experience, the time of your life. And I was like, okay, thank you. Like, whatever, right? I'll accept those terms, take the checks, hop in the car. We're driving back down that driveway. I open the envelopes, and there are each a check for $10,000. I remember seeing it so clearly. Rebecca Keene, $10,000, and there were two of them. There was my 20K, had the 7,500, had the 5K from the captain. I now had $32,500 to go on this voyage, which, by the way, was by far the most impactful thing I have ever done. It was one of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing I've ever done, but it completely changed my life. And so many stories to tell from that. But, the places we went, the people I met, the experience I received, when I came back from that trip, I was, I left when I was 18. I came back when I was 20. I had almost 2 years of sea time. I went on to write my third mate's license, which opened up my door for my second, my first mate, my captain's license. I was a sailor for many years before having children, before getting married and having children. I then moved into the marine regulatory industry and the safety industry. Like, that trip was a catalyst for my life and for, the career I had before becoming a coach. Why I wanted to share that story is, like, little Becky, younger Becky, again, she wasn't sure on the how, and she for sure wasn't attached to the how. She had a plan and she tried things, but she didn't veer from her vision. It's like, I knew I was going. I knew I was supposed to be on that ship. And sometimes the coaches I work with, the people that I support, like, they know they're supposed to do something. They know they are meant for more. Like, and let me speak to you right now, the person who is listening to this show. Like, I bet you know what you want, and I bet you know that you're here for more, that you're meant for more, made for more, right? Like, there's something inside of you that has that very clear knowing. And you might even have the very clear knowing of what it is, the thing you want. But your mind gets trapped and muddled up in the how, and then you don't take any action, or you're so attached to how the how will be that you're not open to other possibilities. And so I was open. I was available. I was available for magic to appear. So I'll wrap up today's podcast by reminding you to paint the picture, paint the vision, be clear and specific on your goal, but with this energy of non-attachment. And non-attachment doesn't mean you don't care, but non-attachment means you're not attached to how it's coming through and even to the timing. Like, I could have easily given up months previous. I could have been like, this isn't working, nothing's happening. And my gosh, people, I see this with, clients who they launch a program and nobody signs up in the first few days, or only one person signs up. And so they believe that it's the offer and that something wasn't right and they shouldn't promote it, and they take their foot off the gas. And it's who you are in that in-between space. It's when the thing hasn't manifested or the thing hasn't landed inside your world, inside your inbox, when the client hasn't signed yet, when the group program hasn't filled up. It's who you are in that space, in that in-between space, that matters. Because it's easy to be high vibe and, sure of yourself and have self-belief when things are happening. But when things aren't happening, that's actually when it matters. when you are in that dip, when the clients haven't come in yet, when the revenue hasn't come in yet, when the program hasn't filled in yet, when the sponsors to send you on the ship haven't come through yet, who are you being in that in-between space? That's what matters. So I hope this episode inspires you to dream bigger, to be connected to the what's, to stay in the energy of the what and the possibility. If you like this episode, please screenshot it, drop it in your Instagram stories, tag me, tell me what you love the most, send it to a friend, share the love. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode.